Jon isn't really my father's son. His last name isn't really Snow. Jon's real name
His name is Aegon Targaryen.
Hey everybody, so I've been getting a lot of requests to do a video for the Sons of the Dragon, which is Martin's new material that he published for the sons of Aegon the Conqueror. He had two sons, Aenys and Maegor the Cruel, so it's fascinating to learn how Maegor got his name Maegor the Cruel, because a lot of the things that happened during that period coincide with things that are happening on the TV show right now. So I'll point out some of the similarities, like there's Cersei the Cruel, but you also have people like Jon Snow and Daenerys. So there is a new round of the giveaway. It's for the new book. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. We're doing weekly videos till season 8 gets here, so we got a long ways to go. But coinciding with all this, we also have the development of the 5 separate prequels. So this is where we get into Targaryen prequel territory. Because of the 5 prequels that they're developing right now, 3 Martin is working on, I believe that a lot of them have to do with the Targaryen family during different periods in history. Because even though they're all supposed to be very different and take place in very different time periods, they're all centered around big events in the history of the world, and most of those big events tie back into the Targaryen family in one way or another, even if it's back in ancient Valyria, which I do believe is one of the prequels. Any Valyrian prequel would obviously tie in with a lot of the Targaryen family, even though they themselves were a relatively minor house in the Freehold. But there is also another book that's probably going to be released next year that is not Winds of Winter. So while The Sons of the Dragon is just about Aegon's 2 sons, the book that Martin is probably going to publish next year or early 2019 is going to be called Fire and Blood, and that's the complete history of the Targaryen family, starting with Aegon the Conqueror. So with exception to the time period that takes place during the upbringing of Aegon the Fifth, because he's dunked from Dunk and Egg, and they confirmed they're not doing Tales of Dunk and Egg for one of the prequels, anything else that he's been writing is fair game. So he essentially has a blueprint for all of the Targaryen kings going back to Aegon the Conqueror. There are a number of big events that we can talk about in separate videos when they give us some more prequel information. The head of HBO said that he's received completed scripts for some of these, and he's really excited. So there will probably be some more prequel news in the next couple of months in the next year. So if you're a big fan of Targaryen history, there will be a lot of it starting next year. But one of the most interesting things about these stories, in addition to being just more Song of Ice and Fire content, is that they also provide historical context for events that are unfolding in present day with the main characters on the TV show. So Sons of the Dragon opens with sort of a historical context for how it was that Aegon conquered the 7 kingdoms, and then because the dominant religion in Westeros at the time was the Faith of the Seven, how he was able to slide the sister wives and their incestuous relationship past the High Septon, because normally that would be a big no-no. So the tale of Aegon's 2 sons becomes this parable for what it means to be a strong leader and how you deal with situations to keep things from spiraling out of control in the kingdom. So both of his sons are born to his different sisters. His older sister gave birth to Aenys. He was born very weak. People were worried about him. He wasn't this strong warrior figure. But because Aegon was still touring the kingdom in his early life, he got to tour around with him. His second son, Maegor, who would eventually become Maegor the Cruel, was more like the Mountain. But there's this really interesting dichotomy. You actually see aspects of Rhaegar's personality in both of these 2 brothers. So imagine Maegor having all of the warrior qualities of Rhaegar, then all of the more sensitive, more practical things going to Aenys without any of the good leadership skills. So the idea is that you have the heir apparent, Aenys, who's very beloved by the people, but is terrible at making decisions, worried about pleasing people, and then you have Maegor, who seems like he's an amazing warrior, but just a terrible person. So eventually what happened is that in his final years, Aegon the Conqueror started turning King's Landing into the King's Landing of today. And it started out as this military camp. They called it King's Landing because that's where he first set down when he conquered the 7 kingdoms. Went back to Dragonstone, then left his only surviving wife, Visenya, the mother of Maegor the Cruel, to oversee the construction of the Red Keep, or what would eventually become the Red Keep. While he was back at Dragonstone, Maegor was still living there. He was about Joffrey's age. He still wasn't quite 13 or 14. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He's quick to anger. He doesn't forgive people. And he just kills anything that gets in his way. Like there's a horse that kicks him. He kills the horse, then chops off the stable boy's face when the stable boy comes running to try and save the horse. So you see the early signs of a Joffrey in the making. But in the next couple of years, Aegon dies of a stroke, no foul play is suspected. Maegor burns the body, which is the Valyrian custom. Like burning bodies is actually a pretty important thing to do in present day so that they can't be turned into the dead. I think I've mentioned it in previous Targaryen videos, but a lot of the Valyrian customs seemingly are built to fight the Night King and the White Walkers, even though the rise of the Valyrian freehold happened after the first long night. But then Aenys is crowned king, everyone starts bowing down to him, but when his brother Maegor bows to him, he says, no, we're going to rule the kingdom together. So now you start to see some of the problems with weak leadership. So eventually an issue of succession arises once Aenys starts having children, and his wife's womb is like a royal flume. They just shoot out child after child after child. So Maegor gets kicked out of the line of succession, and his mother, Visenya, who's Aegon's surviving sister, the Dowager Queen at the time, gets really upset by this. Like, my son Maegor should be next in line for the throne. So they concoct this idea to use Targaryen custom, wed brother to sister, cousin to cousin, to betroth Maegor to Aenys' oldest sister, but everybody just says hard pass on that. And the faith at the time was hardcore against it. Like, they're really upset about the idea of Targaryens marrying Targaryens. And unlike his father Aegon, Aenys is afraid of upsetting them, so he bows to their will. And they say, no, Maegor cannot marry one of my children. So you start to see this division between the brothers, whereby Maegor really wants the throne, and Aenys wants to make him happy, but he also wants to make the Faith of the Seven happy. So eventually Maegor, at the age of 13, marries someone called Cersei Hightower. Don't you just love the imagery that that name evokes in present day? Maegor, who would become Maegor the Cruel, married to someone named Cersei, and now in present day you have Queen Cersei the Cruel. But she had trouble having children. Maegor, being an awful person, took a second wife against the wishes of the Faith of the Seven, but Aenys had to banish him to Pentos for the Faith of the Seven. So he went against his brother to please the Faith of the Seven. And at the time, Aenys had given Maegor the sword Blackfire, who belonged to their father, and his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread. So through weak leadership, the kingdom had started to revolt. Maegor was the one to put down that revolt. So now Aenys had banished him to Pentos, so the kingdom hated the current king Aenys. They sort of liked Maegor, but Maegor was a terrible person who would just kill anybody who got in his way, so he was very good at putting down rebellions. Remember how Maegor is the king that put down the First Faith Militant Uprising the same way that Cersei blew up the Great Sept? He built the dragon pit at the site of the old Sept that he blew up during that uprising. So that uprising itself started during the reign of his brother Aenys when he tried to wed one of his sons to one of his daughters. So the Faith said that was the last straw. So they formed the First Faith Militant, the poor fellows, the warriors' sons, and they started going crazy in King's Landing. Aenys died under mysterious circumstances while in the care of Maegor's mother, Queen Visenya. So because there had been such chaos, the kingdom had hated Aenys so much, the succession passed to Maegor, like Visenya declared that Maegor was the next king. He took the Iron Throne. But by that time, Aenys had already had more sons. They all claimed rights to the throne. Maegor eventually killed the two older ones, took the throne. The Faith Militant Uprising was still a relatively big problem. Then through his own tyranny, he just became this really awful person in his remaining years and died under mysterious circumstances. So one of Aenys' surviving sons, Jaehaerys, became king, and he became known as Jaehaerys the Wise. So you see some of the parallels in present day, like even some of the names recur. You have Cersei the Cruel. You have the idea that some great Targaryen will come to succeed her and lead the realm into a new era of prosperity. Like Daenerys is trying to break the wheel. I know we all have ideas about who's going to survive the final season, but you just get the idea that Martin introduces really big concepts like marrying people within your own family. You have Jon Snow and Daenerys in present day, the struggle that they have, like what do we do about this? How does the realm feel about that? How would they deal with people who speak out against their relationship? And then sort of the broader context for what happens to people who aren't strong leaders or good people, finding ways to deal with really bad situations or preventing them from happening in the first place. So I don't know that the show is going to deal with it a lot, but you have the idea that Daenerys needs to be this amazing leader and deal with a lot of the politicking in the realm while they're dealing with the actual battle with the Night King. But just a reminder about the Season 8 production schedule, they're supposed to wrap by the summer next year. So even if we don't get new episodes till 2019, They haven't quite started to do it yet, but they'll probably release in-production teasers like, hey, here's this cool behind the scenes, here's some of the costumes, here's some of the sets, here's some of the crazy special effects that we're working on. So I'm expecting that to start towards the end of the year, early next year. But leave all your requests for Game of Thrones videos in the comments below. Congratulations to Owen Squelch, you're the latest giveaway winner. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. You can click here to learn all about the Season 8 schedule, and you can click here to learn more about the Season 8 cast that they just announced. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.